I'm Travis Weaver, and you're listening to the Good People Project.
Okay, we're rolling. I love it. Negative stories about politicians get headlines, but there are a ton of good and decent people stepping up to serve in Illinois. The Good People Project tells the unsung story of those who wake up every day to do good and selfless work for the American people. Today's guest is running to be a state representative in north central Illinois. The district includes parts of Dekalb, Ottawa, and LaSalle, which is where she resides and raised a family. She's got a tough race in the general, but after seeing how strongly she dominated in the primary, she has demonstrated that she is truly a woman of the people and the person that people want. Professionally, she worked in banking and finance, which is fantastic because after seeing the majority party's recent budget, she might need to give some budgeting 101 tutoring lessons when she gets elected. She's running a great race. I have full confidence she'll be elected, and I could not be more proud of how she's going about it. So, without any further ado, the wise and talented Liz Bishop. Liz, how's life?
Wonderful, Travis. Thanks so much for being here today.
So I kind of teased this in my intro, but in all seriousness, are you ready to come to Springfield where people seem to think that money grows on trees?
Oh, absolutely. I don't agree with the tree business, but yes, I'm ready.
Yeah, we just passed $1 billion in tax increases, and, sometimes I switched it. You could remind folks that every single dollar that we spend as a government comes from somewhere. It came out of somebody's pocket. It came from somebody who earned it. And so as somebody who's spent time working in banking and finance, does it just kind of pester you when you see how they run a budget versus how you probably run your own personal budget here at your family's house? I mean, when the funds are a little short, you don't just get to go take money from somebody. You got to figure out where to cut costs at.
Yeah, exactly. If I don't have the money in the bank, I don't spend it. In fact, I recall when I first got out of college and had my first job, I was afraid to use a credit card. I didn't want to owe anybody anything. And so if I didn't have the money in the bank or I wasn't getting paid within a few days, I waited and I didn't spend.
Yeah.
And that's a good model. That served me well all my life, and that's a good model for what we need to do in Illinois.
Yeah, I think we'd be really wise to run our state how folks have to run their family budget. And speaking of families, before I get too far in, I'd be remiss if I didn't note that we weren't planning on having a third guest today, but she just wanted to join us so bad from the other room. We got to get the barking to stop. We figured, come on in, the water's warm, could join us. So who do we have here?
So we have Gracie here, who's a 3-year-old toy poodle, and she barked the very first day I got her, and then I didn't hear her bark again for probably a month. She's typically a very quiet dog, but with Travis in the house, I guess she just wanted to be included. So.
Yeah, she's like, Mom, I don't recognize this man. He came in here with this weird suitcase full of equipment.
Yeah.
So you got a good dog there, I think.
Yeah, so she's come to my aid.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about just, especially given your background, how frustrating it can be to see how we operate a state and a budget. So that takes me to my next question of, you don't have to be doing this. You're really doing it because you're a public servant out of the kindness of your heart. So why would you say is your reason for stepping up when a lot of folks would say, man, Liz, are you crazy? Are you sure you want to do that? And the answer is yes, you do want to do it. So why?
I do. And it's interesting because when I first considered running, a number of people tried very hard to talk me out of it. These are good friends who are protective of me, and they knew that to run, I would be sticking my neck out, and they were concerned about that. And what I've been telling people is that I'm at a point in my life where I have the time and the energy to take my turn in Springfield, and I'm happy to do that. My campaign and I have been knocking a lot of doors, and what we're trying to find out from people is what are the key issues? What are the things you're concerned about? And surprisingly enough, many people don't really have an answer for that. And what I've been saying to them is, you just want to live your life, don't you? And they say, yeah, we do. And I end up saying to them, well, let me go to Springfield and fight the fight down there so that you can just live your life and not worry about these things. I can do that right now.
That's so interesting because I just last week spent a day knocking doors for Desi Anderson. And about 50% of the people I talked to at doors were Democrats and the other half were Republican. It's a toss-up district, so it made sense that about half the people I talked to were on each side. And I didn't have one single challenging conversation with a Democrat. I would walk away from doors thinking, I thought that was a Democrat door. The person sounded like such a Republican because the questions they would ask, or I would say, what's important to you in a candidate? And they'd say, I just want somebody who's going to do a good job. I just want somebody that I can trust. I just want somebody that is going to be there for the right reasons. And then, the subsequent things were more like, I'm concerned about the economy. I'm concerned about my taxes. I'm concerned about my kids' K through 12 education in the public school system. But the most common thing was, I just want somebody to do a good job. And that's so in line with how our founding fathers structured this country as a republic, not a true democracy, but as a republic, where I can say, Liz, I don't know that I agree with you on every issue, but I trust you, and I trust that you're going to go study these issues and dig into them and make a better decision than I can. Because so many people have soccer practice and their mortgage and their full-time job that they're concerned about, and so they don't have the time to really dive into the issues. So it makes sense that they just want somebody that they can trust, that they believe is going to do the right thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're finding that as we're working our way along.
So have you had any interesting conversations at doors that have stuck out to you?
Yeah, there, everything from some really funny encounters. One morning, a woman answered her door, fully dressed, beautifully made up, with her hair in curlers. And she looked at me and was quite shocked and said, "Oh, I wasn't expecting you." She was expecting someone else. Yeah. So we turned it into a fun conversation about how she was like the woman in the comic strip Maxine, and had a good laugh about that. I've had other conversations that have been a lot more serious. I talked to someone whose father had been a state representative and staunch Democrat. And so we kind of went through that. And I'm respectful of other people's politics. They're personal. I'm not here to force my views on anyone, but he did seem open to a conversation. So I kept talking to him. And nope, I can't vote for a Republican. I could never do that. And I said, well, you might want to think about this. How about that? And I kept him engaged for 15 or 20 minutes. And by the time I left the conversation, I said, just keep an eye on the race. Mm-hmm. Keep an open mind. Don't rule me out yet. Mm-hmm. And I've had that conversation with a few people. So it's kind of interesting.
As you think about why you're doing this, are there certain things in your upbringing that maybe stick out to you as things that made you want to get engaged in civic service? And I'm curious to hear your answer, because I did find something in your bio that I think might be an answer. So you answer first, and then I can answer second what I think you might say.
Okay. I think I was raised with some pretty almost Depression-era values, very simple. My mother grew up during the Depression. She had 2 skirts and 2 blouses in high school. That was her wardrobe. If she needed a new pencil at school, she went home and asked her father for the money for it. The following day, he would bring money home from work, and the day after that, she'd have the nickel or the dime to buy the pencil. And they lived comfortably, but they also lived very carefully. And those are values that I was raised with. So when I see Springfield spending and spending and spending, it doesn't sit well. I was also raised with, you always leave a place better than you found it. So you contribute. You are part of something. You're productive. You interact with your community.
I share in the Depression era lessons. My grandpa was just a broke Depression era farmer. Actually, my grandpa on my dad's side, as well as my grandmother on my mom's side, but my grandfather, would put Wheaties boxes in his shoes because he had holes in his shoes. He put ketchup and hot sauce and call it tomato soup because he couldn't afford tomato soup. And I just think about that generation, and then how far we've come in the last 100 years, where we have so much pork in our budget, $53.1 billion, and it's $1 billion in tax increases. And when we started working on the budget, when the Democrats started working on the budget, and they knew that the revenue wasn't going to align with the spending, the cost cutting never even entered the equation. Never even entered the equation. And you look at our budget, I mean, $400,000 to the Twisted Egg Roll in Chicago. I mean, what the heck is that about? I mean, billions of dollars that we spend, and I sit on appropriations committees. I know that there's money there that we could cut. never even enters the equation.
Well, and that's the thing. It really should. So I will hear Democrats talking about a balanced budget, and the way they balance it is just finding a place to increase revenue. I look at something like that and I think, okay, this is what we have for income. We're going to have to cut expenses, and you don't have to do that wantonly. There are plenty of responsible
Right.
places to cut. So yeah, I would approach it from that way.
So on world-renowned site Ballotpedia, you said the 1960 moon landing, that was one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind. It was a historic moment that maybe not necessarily engage you in your civic duty, but just kind of maybe engage you in the public landscape.
No, yeah, something like that made an impression. Certainly, who would ever have expected? So yeah, there's always been a fascination with space and man's place in it.
Similarly to that, I once heard a very wise person say, most important things for a politician are integrity and a willingness to listen. Liz Bishop said that.
Oh, did I?
And I just noticed that common thread throughout, I think, a lot of your marketing material,
Mhm.
just about how interested you are in just listening and being at the table and learning and delivering for your constituents. Really seems to be something that is a priority for you.
Yes, and it really does need to be more about listening. I talking about myself isn't something I typically
Mhm.
do. Not even really comfortable doing it. I would rather hear other people's stories. I'd like to hear their thoughts. I like to know what's important to them. And when you do that, by knocking on doors or going to events and talking to people, you really get a sense of your district and what's important to the people in your district. And that's what this job is all about. It's not about my personal priorities. It's about the district and what people here want and what's really serves us best.
Yeah, the adage, two ears, one mouth is
Yes.
so true.
Hmm.
And the way I kind of have taken my philosophy for how I vote my switch, how I represent my district, is generally speaking, I think about every issue in three different buckets. There's a third of the issues that I'm always going to be a no on. There's a third of the issues that I'm always going to be a yes on. And then there's that middle third where I might kind of be leaning one way or the other. And that is where I really feel like I have a capacity to represent my district.
Yes.
Is if I'm not an absolute yes or I'm not an absolute no, and I'm in the middle and I need a tiebreaker, what is the best thing for my district? And that's such a great thing about being a listener and somebody who's knocking on so many doors is when you have your ears open, you're so in tune with your district that it's not so much Liz Bishop voting the switch, it's your district voting the switch. And that's really how I believe it should be.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm always looking for the next thing, for the next step, for the next level of understanding. I don't ever assume that I get it right the first time. I'm always looking to know more, to do better, to expand my thinking or my horizons. Keeps life a little more interesting too.
Mm-hmm. And I also understand you have some summer interns.
I do.
And you were just telling me a little bit about them as we were getting ready for this. And I'm curious, what would you say have been their takeaways? I think that there may be poli-sci students, and I'm sure there's such a difference between
Yes.
what your textbook says and then when you actually go out and talk to people and really understand also just the complexity of issues that there's no textbook that's going to give you an answer on what we need to do on our budget, or you pick the issue,
Yeah, it's fun. Two of my interns, actually, as high school students, worked in a state senator's office as interns, and so they've worked on the legislative side. They're both poli-sci majors, and then I have another young lady who is interested in a completely different field, but was looking for something to do this summer, and we're having some fun with her as well. But I do try to take some time to explain to them what the thinking is, what the strategy is, what the goal is, and how we get this done. And we're having some fun. We're working very, very hard. A campaign is very hard work, but we're also having some fun. And I think that's reflected in our attitudes at the door. I think people are drawn to that. They enjoy that.
I guess if I polled your interns, what would they tell me that they think are the biggest issues in the district that folks want to see addressed?
People are talking about the economy and about healthcare. This district has had some challenges, probably just like many other rural districts. Several hospital closures, another hospital that's services may be cut back, and people are concerned. My area of the district went without a hospital for a year, and that was worrisome.
I know another issue that's big for you is energy affordability,
Yes.
which is just so huge because this is a great stat that I say to anybody that will listen. Over the last 10 years, Illinois has gone from seventh most affordable power in the nation to 37th most affordable power in the nation. So we went to being a nation leader, which is really a big reason why we have such a strong manufacturing footprint is because, if you've got an energy intensive business, you need to go to a place where you can afford to buy your power. So we've gone from 7th to 37th, fallen 30 places over the last decade. If Liz Bishop was in charge, what are a couple of things that you'd like to see done that you think would bring some new sources online and alleviate some of those high energy costs?
We recently had a bill passed that had to do with nuclear energy, and Senator Rezin, who is the senator for this district, and Lance Yadnock, who is the outgoing Democrat representative for this district, worked very hard on that bill. So I'm in the fortunate position to have immediate resources and continue that work with them. They've worked hard on it. Senator Rezin is very knowledgeable about it, and so I would look to work with her on that. Of course, we need to look at other sources too, but nuclear certainly is a strong option.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Lance because so he'll be your predecessor. And for those listening, Lance Yadnock is a Democrat. He's just had a wonderful tenure in the Illinois House, incredibly respected on both sides of the aisle. Has gotten to a point where he decided he's not going to run again. So this is an open seat that Liz Bishop is running for. And in watching Lance leave and knowing just the great job that he did and bipartisanship and trying to serve his district, are there a couple things that you see in him that you would like to bring over to the office? And maybe in that there might be some ways to contrast yourself with your opponent because I'm no expert in the area, but from the outside looking in, Lance, pretty moderate, pretty good fit for the district. The woman running to be the Democrat, way far left of Lance. So are there some things that you think that you probably are more closer to Lance on than your opponent might?
Absolutely. This district was drawn to be a Democrat district. The map was redrawn several years ago to favor and to protect Lance's seat. So that's a bit of a challenge. That said, it's a moderate district, and Lance has represented it that way. Many times he has voted in the interests of the district and not necessarily with his Democrat colleagues. He has worked very well with Senator Rezin across the aisle. They are the model for how Springfield is supposed to work.
Right.
And I would certainly seek to emulate that. If you don't have a conversation with people across the aisle, you're never going to get anywhere. And we need to treat each other respectfully and stand our ground when necessary. But we need to bring that dynamic to Springfield. My opponent formerly was Representative Yadnock's chief of staff. She does lean very far left, and as the campaign progresses, you're going to hear more about that. She doesn't fit the district.
Mm-hmm.
She is no Lance Yadnock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously I'm more excited to have a Republican in the seat than a Democrat, but Lance is just a tough one to lose because it's just so nice when they're the supermajority and you've got a handful of members where you can go sit down, talk to them, and say, hey, I think this is pretty common sense. It might seem like something you'd be opposed to at first, but just give me a couple minutes to kind of lay it out to you. And if you got a handful of people like him that will listen to you, hear you out, give you positive feedback, end up getting on board, they can be such great advocates for our causes. And it's too bad to be losing somebody like him, but I think it's our gain to be gaining somebody like you. I'm curious. So throughout this journey, you have been on it for just about a year. You started doing petitions last August, September.
I suppose September.
Time flies.
It does.
If you could go back to Liz Bishop in fall of 2023, what are a couple pieces of advice that you've learned throughout the journey that you might have wished that you had known a little bit earlier on?
I don't think there's been anything, thankfully, that's been much of a surprise. Although I've never run for an office at this level before, I have run for precinct committeeman several times. I did have an opponent the second time. I learned a great deal from that. And I've done a lot of candidate support. I've worked with some really top-notch candidates who are always generous with their time and explaining their thinking, their strategies. So I had a lot of great groundwork laid. I also have a really wonderful support team, and that was one of the reasons I was willing to do this, because I knew I had a good team in place that I could rely on. And that's making this is tremendously hard work, but I've got a great team, and that makes all the difference in the world.
And you really, truly are a public servant at heart. And I think one just needs to look no further than the role that you play at the cemetery, because that is truly a role where if you don't want to serve people and try to make your community feel like it's a good place to be, it's not like people are jumping up and down.
No. Well, and so it's kind of a fun story. LaSalle has a 150-year-old cemetery, historical. In fact, the first mayor of LaSalle is buried there. He was a congressman. He was also a friend of Abraham Lincoln's. And what I've found is that everyone there has a story, some very interesting stories. I could go on forever. But at some point, 8 or 10 years ago, the cemetery had, 40 or 50 large dead trees that needed to come down and no money to do it. And no one was stepping up. And I'm a big believer when you live in a community and want to contribute, you look for where there's a need. And the jobs with my usual skill set are taken. So I contacted someone at the cemetery and said, I can help with the fundraising. Let's do this. So I started from scratch and made up a donor list that turned out to be a nationwide donor list. And we got the money. We took the trees down. And several years after that, I became a trustee. And the cemetery is a very different environment. Mostly what we do at ours is grounds maintenance. It's really all about keeping the grass mowed, the trees trimmed. We might have 6 to 10 burials in a year. We're not very active. We do some marketing. We do some fundraising. But it's something that's really appreciated by the community. We have
and the families.
And the families.
Sure.
And the families, we have people who are out there once or twice a day visiting loved ones. I drove through one afternoon and I saw a beer can sitting on a headstone. And I was horrified. So I stopped right away, went over to retrieve the can thinking, what if a family member comes out and sees this can? Maybe there are some kids out here drinking. I was really concerned. I picked the can up and realized it was full. And then it occurred to me, it had been left deliberately by a family member for the person. So I quietly put it back down and went on my way. But we have a lot of that. And those things mean a great deal to people. So to be a caretaker of that, I'm told the cemetery looks the best it's looked in decades because we have a great crew. We know how to work together. And we live within a very small budget. We take care of it.
Yeah, I think that's so admirable, just as a way to serve your community and to serve families who have lost loved ones and want to remember them and to know that they have a nice place that they can go and remember those who've gone before.
Yes, yeah, absolutely a place for remembrance.
Okay, last quote from Liz Bishop, I promise. But I just love this one because I think it really just embodies who you are and I think who you will be as a representative. Growing up in Illinois and raising my family here, the values that were important in our household were service, integrity, respect, and standing up for what is right. I just love those things because it is a job of service. You're here to serve. You get a paycheck, but if you're planning on that being a good hourly wage, it's really not because you spend so much time on the road and a lot out of your own pocket. Integrity, oh my gosh, in the state of Illinois, how many politicians do we need to send to jail before people start waking up and realizing we gotta prioritize integrity and who we vote for? Respect, especially being in a moderate district, you're going to have so many constituents that aren't going to be aligned with your vote. And it's a 50-50 district. That means half the time you're going to be with a certain group and half the time not so. And to respect the people that you serve and to be able to go to them and say, this is why I voted this way. I hope you'll understand. There's a lot more complexities than you realize. Just so huge. And then standing up for what is right. There's a lot of opportunities in politics where you can go with the flow and do the popular thing, and the right thing is a lot harder. So I guess of those four things, are there maybe one of them that you feel most particularly excited to embody, or just?
Well, I like the whole concept. What I've been telling people too is that sometimes in politics, I'm finding it's a little bit hard to know which direction to go. You have to have lots of choices to make. And what I find myself doing, and it works beautifully every time, you go back to the basic of how do you serve the voter. And when you can answer that question, then the path usually becomes clear very quickly. Sometimes you have to work a little harder at it. But again, it really boils down to how does it serve the voter? And you have to be able to answer that question honestly and clearly. And then you're on the right path. Then you're fine.
So we talked a little bit about what brought you here, but I'd like to look a little bit more forward. Let's say the year is 2034. You've been a state rep for the last 10 years. You're saying, all right, you got to find somebody else. I'm done. What would you like to look back on as your successes? What would be really just a dream for you to say, gosh, I'm just so proud that I got these handful of things done, that I represented my district in this type of way?
I think overall, well, it would be about knowing that I represented the district well, that I brought back things to the district that served the constituents. A lot of it is about infrastructure. Did I help build that? Did I help maintain it? I think we're going to be doing a lot in healthcare the next decade. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of changes there. So a lot of the work that needs to be done will have to do with that. And certainly here we're sensitive to it because of what we have been through and what we are going through. So I think there'll be a focus on that. And there's a wonderful poem that goes something along the lines of, I have to live with myself, so I must be fit for myself to know. Mm-hmm. And so I think always keeping in mind to do the right thing, because then that serves everyone.
It's such a great reminder. I once heard somebody say there's two kinds of people in this world. There's givers and there's takers. And takers eat better, but givers sleep better. And it's such a great thing to remember because you're going to have some tough choices you got to make. But when you represent your district and you study issues so that you're confident in the decision that you're making, you can sleep well knowing I didn't do that to get a campaign check. I didn't do that to get reelected. I did that because it was the right thing to do. Going back to your quote about how you raise your family with standing up for what is right. As long as you believe that you're doing the right thing, people might question you, but you're going to sleep well knowing that you're serving your people to the best of your ability.
And I think ultimately people sense that. Maybe they don't agree with you, but if you handle it well, they will respect you. Mm-hmm. And next time around, maybe in another issue, they can have what they want.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many folks I've had email me or call me and leave me a voicemail. And I don't want to say that it's nasty because it's not like I'm getting cussed out or anything, but they disagree or they're upset with what I voted or whatever. And I always call them back. I don't email them back. I call them back. Yep. And I've never had somebody upset at the end of the call. Mm-hmm. Yep. So often I think that people feel frustrated because they don't feel like they're being heard.
Exactly.
And I think people don't really mind if you disagree with them. They mind if you slam the door in their face and say, I'm not representing you. I'm representing me, as opposed to I'm doing my best to represent everybody.
Yes.
And I'm sorry on this one that we're not going to be aligned, but just know that I'm listening and I want to be engaged and I want to represent you as part of this district.
Exactly. And I think, again, it goes back to listening. So important. If people feel as if they're being listened to, that goes a long way towards smoothing things over.
Mm-hmm. Well, Liz, you've got some great things that you're passionate about here: energy affordability, healthcare, public safety, and immigration. I just cannot wait to see what the next couple of years has for you once you get elected and be a state rep, because I know that you're bold in what you want to grab by the horns, and I have just full confidence you're going to go about things in the right way.
Thank you very much, Travis. Appreciate the compliments and all the encouragement.
Well, it's been a pleasure sitting down with you today. If folks want to follow you, Facebook, Instagram, what are some ways that they can learn more about Liz Bishop?
I do have a website. It's electlizbishop.com, and I do have a Facebook page, Liz Bishop for State Representative.
Okay. Well, very good. Thanks so much for spending time with us today, and best of luck in the fall.
Thank you, Travis.
Awesome job.
I'm Travis Weaver, and you're listening to the Good People Project. I'm Travis Weaver, and you're listening to the Good People Project.